In a galaxy where dragons were gods and humans were barely tolerated as maintenance staff, nobody expected the fate of an entire star system to rest in the calloused hands of a night shift janitor. But when the most powerful creature in known space began dying in agony, and every brilliant alien mind failed to save her, it would take the simple compassion of a human cleaning toilets to unlock a mystery that could either save billions of lives or doom them all. Sometimes the greatest heroes carry mop buckets instead of swords. Marcus Chun wheeled his cleaning cart down the pristine corridors of the Astral Medical Complex, the soft hum of the facility's environmental systems providing a gentle backdrop to another quiet night shift. The complex was one of the most advanced medical facilities in the Andromeda sector, a gleaming monument to interspecies cooperation that floated in the void between three star systems. Here, the galaxy's most brilliant minds worked to heal the sick and injured from dozens of different species. Most nights, Marcus found peace in his work. The repetitive motions of mopping floors and emptying waste bins gave him time to think, to process the day's events, and to appreciate the simple satisfaction of leaving something cleaner than he found it. At 52, he had worked as a janitor for nearly 3 decades, and while others might see it as menial work, Marcus understood its importance. Clean environments saved lives, prevented infections, and created spaces where healing could happen. Tonight felt different, though. Throughout the facility, there was an undercurrent of tension that even the night shift couldn't escape. Medical personnel hurried through the halls with worried expressions, their usual professional calm replaced by something approaching panic. Emergency meetings had been called. Top specialists from across the galaxy were being summoned, all because of a single patient in the facility's most secure wing. The patient was Thessarian Prime, known simply as the mother to most of the galaxy. She was a Draconic, one of the ancient race of dragon-like beings who were considered the most powerful creatures in known space. Draconics were massive, intelligent beyond measure, and possessed abilities that seemed to defy the known laws of physics. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, generate energy fields that could power entire cities, and their lifespans stretched across millennia. In many ways, they were living gods. Thessarian Prime was special even among her own kind. She was the oldest known Draconic, having lived for over 10,000 years. More importantly, she was the mother of 17 offspring, each of whom had gone on to become leaders, explorers, or guardians of different sectors of the galaxy. Her children held positions of immense power and influence. When Thessarian Prime spoke, entire civilizations listened. 3 weeks ago, she had arrived at the medical complex in a state that had shocked everyone who saw her. The magnificent creature, who normally radiated power and grace, was writhing in agony. Her scales, once a brilliant crimson that seemed to contain inner fire, had dulled to a sickly brown. Her great wings hung limp at her sides, and her massive head was held low in obvious pain. The galaxy's best doctors had examined her. Xenobiologists who had spent their entire careers studying draconic physiology were baffled. Advanced scanners that could detect cellular damage at the quantum level found nothing wrong. Blood tests came back normal. Brain scans showed no abnormalities. By every measurable standard, Thessarian Prime was perfectly healthy. Yet she was clearly suffering. Marcus had only seen her once, 3 days after her arrival. He had been cleaning the observation deck outside her containment room when Dr. Kethvar, the facility's chief of xenobiology, had allowed him to look through the one-way viewing panel. What he saw had stayed with him ever since. The containment room was enormous, designed to accommodate beings of extraordinary size. It was filled with the specific atmospheric mixture that Draconics required, maintained at the exact temperature and humidity that would be most comfortable. The floor was covered with a substance that mimicked the crystalline caves where Draconics traditionally made their homes. In the center of this carefully prepared space, Thessarian Prime lay curled in what could only be described as a position of misery. Her great head was tucked under one wing, and Her body shook with what looked like silent sobs. Occasionally, she would lift her head and release a low, mournful sound that seemed to vibrate through the very walls of the facility. It was the sound of grief, deep and profound, but mixed with something else that Marcus couldn't quite identify. What had struck him most was how alone she looked. Despite being surrounded by the galaxy's most advanced medical technology and attended by dozens of specialists, Thessarian Prime seemed utterly isolated in her suffering. Marcus had asked Dr. Kethvar what they thought was wrong with her. "We don't know," the doctor had replied, his 4 arms gesturing helplessly. "Every test we run comes back normal. Her vital signs are stable. Her biological functions are operating within normal parameters. But clearly, something is causing her significant distress." "Have you asked her what's wrong?" Marcus had asked. Dr. Kethvar had looked at him with surprise. "Asked her?" "Mr. Chun, Thessarian Prime, is not responding to communication attempts. She has not spoken since arriving here. Our linguistic specialists have tried every form of draconic communication we know, from verbal speech to electromagnetic pulse patterns. She simply does not respond." That conversation had been 2.5 weeks ago, and according to the gossip Marcus overheard from the medical staff, there had been no progress since then. If anything, Thessarian Prime's condition seemed to be worsening. She barely moved now, ate nothing, and the mournful sounds she made were becoming weaker and less frequent. Her 17 children had begun arriving at the facility. Marcus had seen some of them during his shifts, massive beings who moved through the corridors with a barely contained fury that made even the most experienced staff nervous. They demanded answers, solutions, results. But the medical team had none to give. Tonight, Marcus was scheduled to clean the lower levels of the facility, which included the corridor outside Thessarian Prime's containment room. It was an assignment that most of the janitorial staff tried to avoid. The presence of so many powerful draconics made everyone nervous, and there have been incidents where staff members have been reduced to trembling wrecks just from being in their proximity. But Marcus didn't mind. In his years of working at the facility, he had learned that every being, no matter how powerful or alien, was just trying to get through each day as best they could. The draconics were worried about their mother, and that was something Marcus could understand and respect. As he approached the containment level, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavier. The normal sounds of the facility were muted here, replaced by the low hum of the specialized life support systems that maintained Thessarian Prime's environment. The lighting was different too, shifted toward the red end of the spectrum to better accommodate draconic vision. Marcus began his usual routine, starting with the public areas and working his way toward the more sensitive sections. He emptied trash receptacles, cleaned surfaces, and mopped floors with the same careful attention he gave every part of his work. As he worked, he noticed that the medical staff seemed more tense than usual. They moved quickly, spoke in hushed tones, and cast worried glances toward the containment room. Dr. Kethvar emerged from Thessarian Prime's room looking haggard and defeated. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, and his multiple eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion. He noticed Marcus and walked over. "Mr. Chun," the doctor said, his voice heavy with fatigue. "I'm afraid I have some disturbing news. Thessarian Prime's condition has taken a significant turn for the worse. Her life signs are beginning to fluctuate in ways we don't understand. We may be looking at a complete biological shutdown within the next 72 hours. Marcus paused in his cleaning and looked up at the doctor. "I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything new you've discovered that might help?" Dr. Kethvar's shoulders sagged. "Nothing. We've brought in specialists from every major medical institution in the galaxy. We've tried treatments that work on similar species. We've even attempted some experimental approaches that push the boundaries of medical ethics. Nothing has any effect. What about her children? Are they able to help?" "They're beside themselves with grief and anger. 3 more arrived today, bringing the total to 9. They've threatened to tear the facility apart if we don't find a solution soon. I understand their frustration, but their presence is making it difficult for the medical team to work." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Doctor, would it be possible for me to see her again? I know it's not usual protocol, but Dr. Kethvar looked surprised. I don't see what purpose that would serve, Mr. Chun. As I said, she's not responsive to any form of communication. The observation deck is available if you simply wish to see her condition, but I should warn you that it's quite disturbing. I'd appreciate that, if it's not too much trouble. The doctor led Marcus to the observation deck, a small platform that overlooked Thessarian Prime's containment room through a transparent barrier that could withstand the impact of a small meteor. Dr. Kethvar activated the viewing panel, and Marcus looked down at the massive chamber below. What he saw was heartbreaking. Thessarian Prime had deteriorated significantly since Marcus had last seen her. Her once magnificent scales now looked dull and brittle. Her breathing was labored and irregular. Most disturbing of all, she had positioned herself in the farthest corner of the room, as far from the observation deck and monitoring equipment as possible. She lay with her back to all the sensors and cameras, her great head pressed against the wall, as if she was trying to hide from the world. She moved there 2 days ago, Dr. Kethvar explained quietly. We think she's trying to find some form of privacy in her final hours. It's making monitoring her condition more difficult, but we didn't want to stress her further by forcing her to move. Marcus watched the labored rise and fall of her massive form and felt something twist in his chest. Doctor, has anyone considered that maybe she's not physically sick at all? What do you mean? I mean, what if this isn't a medical problem? What if it's emotional or psychological? Dr. Kethvar's multiple eyes blinked in sequence, a sign that he was processing new information. Mr. Chun, we have some of the galaxy's best xenopsychologists working on this case. They've tried every form of therapy and counseling technique known to work with draconics. She simply won't respond to any of them. But what if she doesn't need a specialist? What if she just needs someone to listen? Before Dr. Kethvar could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the facility. Red lights flashed along the corridors, and an automated voice announced, "Medical emergency in Containment 7. All senior staff report immediately." Dr. Kethvar's face went pale. "That's her room," he said, and ran toward the emergency access panel. Through the viewing panel, Marcus could see that Thessarian Prime had collapsed completely. Her breathing had become extremely shallow, and her massive form was trembling. Medical personnel were rushing into the room, their instruments and scanners ready, but they seemed hesitant to approach her directly. "She's going into complete system failure," Dr. Kethvar said, reading the data streaming across his emergency tablet. Heart rate dropping, brain activity decreasing, temperature falling. "We're losing her." Marcus watched as the medical team surrounded Thessarian Prime with their equipment. They worked with professional efficiency, but he could see the frustration and helplessness in their movements. They were trying everything they could think of, but nothing was working because they didn't understand what was actually wrong. "Doctor," Marcus said suddenly, "let me go down there." "Mr. Chun, I appreciate your concern, but this is a medical emergency. Only trained personnel are allowed in containment during Doctor. With respect, your trained personnel have been trying for 3 weeks, and they're no closer to a solution now than they were on day 1. What do you have to lose by letting someone try a different approach?" Dr. Kethvar looked at him for a long moment, then at the readouts showing Thessarian Prime's deteriorating condition. "Mr. Chun, even if I wanted to allow it, the safety protocols alone would require hours of preparation. Environmental suits, decontamination procedures, clearance from a dozen different departments. What if we don't have hours?" Marcus interrupted. "What if we only have minutes?" As if in response to his words, another alarm sounded, this one more urgent than the first. "Cardiac arrest," Dr. Kethvar said grimly. "We're about to lose her completely." Marcus looked down at the scene in the containment room. The medical team was working frantically, but he could see that their efforts were having no effect. Thessarian Prime's life signs were continuing to fade, and there was a sense of growing desperation among the staff. "Doctor, I'm asking you to trust me. I don't have any medical training, and I don't understand draconic physiology. But I've spent 30 years working around people who were sick, hurt, scared, or dying. Sometimes the most sophisticated medicine in the galaxy can't fix what's wrong with someone. Sometimes they just need to know that somebody cares. Dr. HFY stared at him, clearly torn between his professional protocols and the reality that nothing else was working. If she dies, Marcus continued, her 17 children are going to hold you and this facility responsible. If she dies because you wouldn't let a janitor try to help, how are you going to explain that to them? The doctor's multiple eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, there was a new resolve in them. Mr. Chun, what you're asking could get us both killed. If I override the safety protocols and something goes wrong, we could be dealing with a containment breach, a toxic atmosphere leak, or worse. I understand the risks, Doctor. I'm willing to take them. Dr. HFY looked at the readings on his tablet again. Thessarian Prime's life signs were continuing to decline. I need you to understand that once you go in there, I won't be able to get you out immediately if something goes wrong. The decontamination cycle alone takes 20 minutes. I understand. And I need you to know that if this somehow makes her condition worse, if your presence causes her additional stress or harm, I'll have to take full responsibility for allowing it. Doctor, I don't think it can get much worse than it already is. Dr. HFY was silent for several seconds, watching the frantic activity in the containment room below. Finally, he activated his communicator. This is Dr. HFY. I need emergency clearance for an unscheduled entry into Containment 7. Authorization code Gamma 774. Prepare for immediate atmospheric adjustment and safety protocol override. The response came back immediately. Doctor, are you sure? We have no personnel cleared for entry who aren't already inside. I'm sure. Begin preparations immediately. Dr. HFY turned to Marcus. Mr. Chun, I hope you know what you're doing, because in about 3 minutes, you're going to be in a room with one of the most powerful creatures in the galaxy, and she's dying. If this goes wrong, it won't just be your life at risk. It could be everyone's. Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Doctor, I need you to do one thing for me. When I go in there, I need you to call off your medical team. Not permanently, just long enough for me to try to talk to her without a dozen people surrounding her with equipment. Mr. Chun, if we pull the medical team and her condition deteriorates further, then we'll be exactly where we are right now, except we'll have tried something different. Dr. HFY considered this for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. I'll give you 10 minutes. If there's no improvement in her condition by then, the medical team goes back and whether you're ready or not. That's all I need. As they made their way toward the containment room entry port, Marcus tried to push down the fear that was growing in his chest. He had no real idea what he was going to do once he was in the room with Thessarian Prime. He only knew that looking at her through the observation panel had reminded him of something he had seen too many times during his years working in a medical facility. The look of someone who was suffering not because their body was broken, but because they felt completely alone in their pain. The entry port cycled open with a soft hiss, and Marcus found himself looking into the vast chamber where Thessarian Prime lay dying. The atmosphere was thick and warm, with a metallic taste that reminded him of being near a thunderstorm. The lighting was dim and reddish, casting strange shadows that seemed to shift and dance. Dr. HFY's voice came through the communication system. Mr. Chun, you're cleared to enter. I'm calling the medical team back to the observation level. You have 10 minutes. Marcus took a deep breath, picked up his cleaning cart, and walked into the chamber. Up close, Thessarian Prime was even more magnificent than he had imagined. Even in her current condition, she was massive, her body stretching nearly the full length of the chamber. Her scales, despite their dullness, still held hints of the incredible beauty they must have possessed in her prime. Her wings, folded against her sides, were easily large enough to shelter a building. But what struck Marcus most was how small she looked despite her size. Curled in the corner of the chamber, pressed against the wall, she looked like nothing so much as a frightened child trying to hide from the world. Marcus set his cleaning cart aside and slowly approached her. As he got closer, he could hear the labored sound of her breathing and see the slight tremor that ran through her massive form. Her great head was turned away from him, facing the wall. "Hello, Thessarian Prime," Marcus said softly. "My name is Marcus Chun. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to see if maybe you'd like some company." There was no response, but Marcus thought he detected a slight change in her breathing pattern. "I know you have a lot of doctors and specialists taking care of you," Marcus continued, sitting down on the floor a comfortable distance away from her. "And I know they're doing everything they can to help you feel better. But I thought maybe you might want to talk to someone who isn't trying to fix you. Sometimes it helps just to have somebody listen." Still no response, but Marcus wasn't discouraged. In his years of working around sick people, he had learned that communication didn't always involve words. I've been working here for almost 15 years, Marcus said, settling into a more comfortable position. "I've seen a lot of patients come through these halls. Some of them were scared, some were angry, some were sad. But I think the hardest thing for most of them was feeling like nobody understood what they were going through." Marcus paused, watching for any sign that Thessarian Prime was listening. Her breathing seemed slightly less labored, though it was hard to be sure. "I heard about your children," Marcus continued. 17 of them, and from what I understand, they're all successful, important people in the galaxy. That must make you proud, but I imagine it also makes you feel a lot of pressure. When you're the mother of 17 people who have so much responsibility, who gets to take care of you when you need it? For the first time since Marcus had entered the chamber, Thessarian Prime's great head lifted slightly from the wall. She didn't turn toward him, but the change in position suggested that she was listening. "I have a daughter," Marcus said. "Just one, but she means everything to me. She's a doctor now, working at a hospital on Earth. She's brilliant, successful, everything I could have hoped for. But sometimes I worry that she's so busy taking care of other people that she forgets to take care of herself. I wonder if maybe that's something you understand." Marcus could see that Thessarian Prime's breathing was becoming more regular, and the tremor in her body seemed to be subsiding slightly. "The thing is," Marcus continued, "when you spend your whole life being strong for other people, being the one they come to when they need help or guidance, it can be hard to admit when you're the one who needs help. It can be hard to let yourself be vulnerable, even when you're hurting." Slowly, very slowly, Thessarian Prime began to turn her massive head toward Marcus. Her eyes, when they came into view, were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were ancient, wise, and filled with a depth of sadness that seemed to encompass the weight of millennia. "Hello," Marcus said gently. "It's nice to meet you." For a long moment, they looked at each other across the chamber. Then, in a voice that was little more than a whisper, but still managed to resonate through the space around them, Thessarian Prime spoke. "Hello, Marcus Chun. It is nice to meet you as well." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge that had been waiting to be built for weeks. Marcus felt his heart racing, not from fear, but from the profound realization that this simple exchange had accomplished more than all the medical technology and expertise that had been focused on Thessarian Prime since her arrival. "Thank you for talking with me," Marcus said, keeping his voice gentle and steady. "How are you feeling?" Thessarian Prime's massive head tilted slightly, as if she was considering the question carefully. "I am tired, Marcus Chun. So very tired. Tired for being sick, or tired from something else?" The great dragon was quiet for several moments, and Marcus could see something shifting in her ancient eyes. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight of emotion that seemed to press against the very walls of the chamber. "I am tired of carrying burdens that were never meant to be mine alone," she said. "I'm tired of being strong when I no longer feel strong. I'm tired of being the answer to everyone's problems when I cannot solve my own." Marcus nodded slowly. In those few words, Thessarian Prime had revealed more about her condition than weeks of medical testing. "It sounds like you've been carrying a lot of responsibility for a very long time." 10,000 years, Thessarian Prime replied, and there was a tremor in her voice that had nothing to do with physical weakness. For 10,000 years, I have been the mother, the wise one, the source of guidance and strength for my children and their children. Every major decision, every crisis, every moment of doubt, they come to me. And I have never refused them, never told them I don't know the answer, never admitted that I too have fears and uncertainties. Marcus felt a deep ache in his chest as he listened. He thought about his own daughter, brilliant and accomplished, and how even she still called him when she was facing difficult decisions. He couldn't imagine carrying that responsibility for 17 children, let alone for 10,000 years. That sounds incredibly lonely, Marcus said. For the first time since Marcus had entered the chamber, Thessarian Prime turned her head fully toward him. Her massive eyes, each one larger than Marcus's entire torso, focused on his face with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but somehow felt like a gift. "You understand," she said, and there was surprise in her voice. "In all these weeks, with all the brilliant minds that have examined me, you are the first to understand." "I think understanding doesn't always require brilliance," Marcus replied. "Sometimes it just requires willingness to listen to what someone is actually saying instead of what we think they should be saying." Thessarian Prime shifted her position slightly, and Marcus was relieved to see that the movement seemed less labored than before. Her breathing was definitely more regular now, and some of the tension seemed to be leaving her massive frame. "Tell me about your children," Marcus said. "What are they like?" A flicker of something that might have been a smile crossed Thessarian Prime's features. "They are magnificent," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried warmth instead of weariness. "Zorathax commands a fleet that protects 3-star systems from pirate raiders. Velthera discovered the cure for the Red Plague that was devastating the outer colonies. Nethes has established trade routes that have brought prosperity to dozens of worlds." As she spoke about her children, Marcus could see the pride in her eyes, but also something else, a sadness that grew deeper with each accomplishment she described. "They sound incredible," Marcus said. "You must be very proud of them." "I am," Thessarian Prime replied. "But do you know what the tragedy is, Marcus Chun? In all their great accomplishments, in all their important work, they have become strangers to me. When they visit, they come seeking advice for some crisis or requesting guidance for some decision. We discuss strategy and policy and the weight of command, but we never simply talk." Marcus felt like a puzzle piece was clicking into place. "When was the last time one of them asked how you were doing? Not as the wise mother, but just as you?" Thessarian Prime's great head drooped, and Marcus saw what might have been a tear forming in one of her enormous eyes. "I cannot remember," she whispered. "It has been so long, I cannot remember." The silence that followed was profound and heavy. Through the observation window, Marcus could see Dr. Kethvar and his team watching with intense interest. He knew they were recording every word, analyzing every interaction, but somehow that seemed unimportant compared to the conversation he was having with this ancient, lonely being. "You know," Marcus said after a while, "I think one of the hardest things about being a parent is knowing when to step back and let your children be adults. But I also think one of the hardest things about being an adult child is remembering that your parent is a person with their own needs and feelings, not just a source of wisdom and support." Thessarian Prime lifted her head again, studying Marcus with renewed interest. "You speak as though you have experience with this." Marcus smiled sadly. "My daughter Sarah is 31 years old now. She's a trauma surgeon at one of Earth's best hospitals. She saves lives every day, and I'm incredibly proud of her. But for a long time, the only time she called me was when she needed advice about work or when she had a problem she couldn't solve. It took me years to realize that she wasn't calling me because she was busy or because she didn't care. She wasn't calling because she thought I expected her to have everything figured out. How did you change that?" "I called her," Marcus said simply, "not to give advice or to check on her work. I called her to ask about her day, to tell her about mine, to share a funny story, or to complain about the weather. I had to show her that I wanted to know Sarah the person, not just Sarah the accomplished doctor who happened to be my daughter." Thessarian Prime was quiet for a long time, processing this. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. In my species, tradition dictates that the young seek out the wisdom of their elders. It would be unusual for me to reach out to my children without them first coming to me. Maybe unusual isn't always wrong, Marcus suggested. Maybe sometimes unusual is exactly what's needed. But what if they don't want to hear from me unless they need something? What if I reach out and discover that the relationships I thought we had don't actually exist? Marcus could hear the fear in her voice, and it was the same fear that every parent carried. The fear that their children had outgrown their need for them, that the bond they cherished existed only in their own mind. Then, you'll know where you stand, Marcus said gently. And that's better than spending your energy maintaining relationships that only exist in your imagination. But I suspect you might be surprised. Sometimes our children don't call because they're afraid of bothering us, or because they think we're too busy or important to be interested in their daily lives. Thessarian Prime's breathing had become completely normal now, and Marcus could see that the dull color was beginning to fade from her scales. Whatever was affecting her was responding to their conversation in ways that no medical intervention had achieved. "Marcus Chun," she said, "may I ask you something that might seem strange?" "Of course. When you clean these halls, when you perform your work here, do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel as though your life has meaning?" Marcus considered the question carefully. It wasn't something he had been asked often, and certainly not by someone whose opinion carried the weight of millennia. "Yes," he said finally, "I do feel fulfilled. Not because cleaning is glamorous or because anyone thinks it's important work, but because I know that what I do makes a difference. Every surface I clean might prevent an infection. Every task I complete, well, might make someone's day a little easier. When I go home at night, I know that I've contributed something positive to the world, even if it's small and even if no one notices. And yet you have no great titles, command no fleets, cure no plagues." "No, I don't. But I think meaning doesn't always come from the size of your impact. Sometimes it comes from the fact that you made any impact at all, and that you made it with care and intention." Thessarian Prime's great eyes closed for a moment, and when they opened, there was something new in them, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "I've spent 10,000 years believing that my worth came from my ability to solve every problem, answer every question, bear every burden. But listening to you, I realized that perhaps I have been confusing being useful with being valued. My children don't need me to be perfect and all-knowing. They need me to be their mother. And you need them to see you as more than just a source of wisdom," Marcus added. "You need them to see you as a person who has her own joys and struggles and who values their company for its own sake, not just as an opportunity to provide guidance." As they talked, Marcus became aware that Thessarian Prime's life signs, which had been declining steadily for weeks, were stabilizing and even beginning to improve. Her scales were regaining some of their luster, her breathing was strong and regular, and the tremor that had racked her massive frame was gone. "I feel something I have not felt in many years," Thessarian Prime said suddenly. "Hope. Not hope that I can solve some great crisis or fulfill some important duty, but hope that there might be more to my life than the weight of everyone else's expectations." "What would you like to do differently?" Marcus asked. "I want to call my children," she said, and there was strength in her voice now that had been completely absent when Marcus first entered the chamber. "Not to summon them for some urgent matter, not to provide counsel for some crisis, but simply to talk with them. I want to ask Zorathax about the poetry he used to write when he was young. I want to know if Velthera still has that collection of rare crystals she was so proud of. I want to hear about Nethys' latest adventure, not because it affects trade policy, but because I'm curious about what he's learned and seen." Marcus could see the transformation happening before his eyes. The being who had been dying from loneliness and the weight of expectations was rediscovering the possibility of connection and joy. "That sounds wonderful," Marcus said. "And I think you might be surprised by how happy they'll be to hear from you. There is something else, Thessarian Prime said, her voice taking on a different tone. Marcus Chun, you have given me something precious today. You have reminded me that healing sometimes has nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with understanding. I want to give you something in return. You don't need to give me anything, Marcus said quickly. Just seeing you feeling better is more than enough. Nevertheless, I insist. Thessarian Prime shifted her position, turning more fully toward Marcus. In my years, I have learned many things about the nature of existence, about the connections between all living beings, about the forces that bind the universe together. I want to share one of these insights with you. Marcus waited, sensing that whatever Thessarian Prime was about to tell him was important. Your species, humans, are remarkable in ways that most of the galaxy fails to understand, she said. You are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent, not the most technologically advanced. But you have something that is rarer and more valuable than any of these things. What's that? You have the ability to see the individual worth in every being you encounter, regardless of their power or status or usefulness. You came into this chamber not because you thought you could cure me with medicine, but because you saw someone who was suffering and wanted to help. That is not common in the galaxy, Marcus Chun. Most species, including my own, tend to measure worth by capability, by what someone can do for them or for society. But humans have this remarkable capacity to value others simply for who they are. Marcus felt a warmth spreading through his chest at these words. I think a lot of humans would disagree with you about that. Some would, yes. But the fact that your species even has the concept, the fact that you understand kindness for its own sake rather than as a strategy for gain, sets you apart. And I believe that this quality, more than any technology or weapon or diplomatic skill, will be what allows humanity to ultimately unite the galaxy. That's quite a prediction, Marcus said with a smile. It is not a prediction, Marcus Chun. It is a certainty. I have lived long enough to recognize the patterns that shape history. Empires built on strength alone eventually crumble. Alliances based on mutual benefit dissolve when circumstances change. But connections built on understanding and genuine care for others endure across millennia. As the Thessarian Prime spoke, Marcus could hear activity increasing outside the chamber. Through the observation window, he could see Dr. Kethvar in animated discussion with other members of the medical team. Their instruments were detecting the dramatic improvement in Thessarian Prime's condition, and they were undoubtedly eager to understand what was happening. I think the doctors are getting excited about your recovery, Marcus observed. Thessarian Prime followed his gaze to the observation deck. Yes, they will want to study what happened here, to understand how a conversation accomplished what all their medicine could not. But I fear they will miss the most important lesson, which is that healing is not always about fixing what is broken. Sometimes it is about reconnecting what has been separated. I was not dying from any physical ailment, Marcus Chun. I was dying from disconnection, from the weight of carrying burdens alone, from the belief that my worth came only from my usefulness to others. You healed me by helping me remember that I am valuable simply for being myself, and by reminding me that true relationships require vulnerability and mutual care. A soft chime sounded through the chamber, indicating that Marcus's allotted time was nearly up. Dr. Kethvar's voice came through the communication system. Mr. Chun, we're seeing remarkable improvements in all of Thessarian Prime's vital signs. Her life signs have not only stabilized, but are showing levels of strength we haven't seen since she arrived. Whatever you've done, it appears to be working. However, we need to begin post-improvement monitoring and assessment. Marcus looked at Thessarian Prime, who nodded her understanding. Go, Marcus Chun. You have your own duties to attend to, and I have mine. But I hope you will visit me again before I leave this place. I would like that very much, Marcus said, standing up and brushing off his uniform. And Marcus, Thessarian Prime added, thank you. Not just for listening to me, but for reminding me that sometimes the most powerful healing comes from the simplest human connections. As Marcus made his way toward the exit, he could hear Thessarian Prime already reaching out to the medical team, her voice strong and clear as she began explaining her condition in terms they could understand and record. But he also heard her ask Dr. Kethvar to help her establish communication with her children, not for any emergency or crisis, but simply because she wanted to talk with them. Walking back through the facility's corridors with his cleaning cart, Marcus reflected on the strange turn his night shift had taken. He had come to work expecting to mop floors and empty trash bins. Instead, he had found himself in conversation with one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, and somehow that conversation had saved a life that all the advanced medical technology in the sector had been unable to help. But perhaps most remarkably, Marcus realized that he had learned something important about himself. For years, he had defined his worth by the quiet satisfaction of work well done, by the knowledge that he was contributing something positive even if it went unnoticed. Tonight, he had discovered that his real gift was not his ability to clean effectively, but his ability to see and respond to the humanity in others, regardless of their form or status. As he rounded the corner toward the service elevators, Marcus encountered 3 of Thessarian Prime's children who were rushing toward her chamber. They moved with urgent purpose, their massive forms radiating power and concern. But as they passed Marcus, the largest of them, a magnificent being with scales that shifted between gold and bronze, paused. "You are the human who spoke with our mother," the dragon said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through Marcus's entire body. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "I hope it was helpful." The dragon studied Marcus for a long moment, his ancient eyes reflecting a wisdom that spanned centuries. "My name is Zorathax, and I'm the eldest of her children. We were told that she has been unwell. She's feeling much better now," Marcus said. "I think she's looking forward to seeing you and your siblings." Something shifted in Zorathax's expression. In all my years, through all my accomplishments and failures, I have never simply visited my mother to see how she was doing. I have only come to her when I needed guidance or when duty required it. Marcus felt a surge of recognition. She mentioned that. I think she understands, though. Sometimes we get so focused on being responsible that we forget about just being family. The human understanding of family relationships has always puzzled us, Zorathax said thoughtfully. You seem to maintain connections based on affection rather than utility. Perhaps there is wisdom in that approach that we have overlooked. Maybe it's not about choosing one approach over another, Marcus suggested. Maybe it's about finding a balance between being useful to each other and simply enjoying each other's company. Zorathax nodded slowly. I believe you may be right. And I believe this is a lesson my mother has been trying to teach us for longer than we realized. As Zorathax continued toward his mother's chamber, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction settling over him. The crisis that had brought Thessarian Prime to the medical facility was resolving, but more importantly, it seemed to be opening the door to deeper healing in relationships that had been strained by years of unexamined expectations and roles. The rest of Marcus's shift passed quietly. He completed his usual rounds, but his mind kept returning to his conversation with Thessarian Prime and the profound truth she had shared about human nature. He had never thought of himself as particularly special or gifted, but tonight he had learned that sometimes the most important abilities were the ones that seemed so natural you didn't even realize you possessed them. As dawn approached, and Marcus prepared to end his shift, he received a message from Dr. Kethvar asking him to stop by the medical director's office before leaving. Curious, but not particularly worried, Marcus made his way to the administrative level of the facility. Dr. Kethvar was waiting for him with an expression that mixed exhaustion with amazement. "Mr. Chun," the doctor said, "I want you to know that what happened tonight will likely be studied and discussed in medical institutions throughout the galaxy. In 3 hours of conversation, you accomplished what 3 weeks of advanced medical intervention could not." "I just listened to her," Marcus said simply. "Sometimes that's all anyone really needs." "Yes, but it's more than that. You intuitively understood something that our entire medical team missed, that not all suffering is biological in nature. Thessarian Prime was experiencing what we might call a crisis of meaning and connection. Her body was responding to emotional and spiritual distress in ways that mimicked physical illness. Marcus nodded. It makes sense when you think about it. If you're deeply unhappy or lonely, your whole body suffers. Exactly. And this has implications far beyond Thessarian Prime's case. You've helped us understand that we need to expand our definition of medicine to include emotional and relational healing, especially when treating species with complex social structures. Dr. Kethvar paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Mr. Chun, I know this may sound unusual, but I would like to offer you a position on our medical team. Not as a doctor or nurse, but as something new, a therapeutic communication specialist. Your role would be to talk with patients who aren't responding to traditional treatment, to listen for the things that medical training might cause us to overlook. Marcus was quiet for several moments, processing this unexpected offer. Doctor, I appreciate the recognition, I really do. But I'm not sure I want to change what I do. May I ask why? Because I think the reason tonight worked is that I wasn't trying to be a medical professional. I was just being myself, doing what felt natural. If you make it my official job, if there are protocols and procedures and expectations, I'm afraid it might lose what made it effective in the first place. Dr. Ketwar nodded slowly. That's a very insightful response. You're concerned that formalization might interfere with authenticity. Something like that. But I tell you what, if you ever have a patient who isn't responding to treatment and you think they might benefit from talking to someone who isn't trying to fix them, I'd be willing to help. Not as part of my job, but as myself. I think that might be exactly the right approach, Dr. Kethvar said. And Mr. Chun, thank you for Thessarian Prime, for a family, and for teaching all of us something important about healing. As Marcus finally made his way home that morning, he reflected on the strange chain of events that had led him into conversation with one of the galaxy's most powerful beings. He had started the night thinking about the simple satisfaction of work well done, and had ended it with a profound new understanding of his own capabilities and the unique gifts that humanity brought to the galactic community. But perhaps most importantly, he had learned that healing was not just about medicine or technology or expertise. Sometimes the most powerful healing came from the willingness to see someone else's pain and respond with simple, genuine human connection. The universe, Marcus realized, was full of people who needed someone to listen to them, regardless of their power or status or species. And if that was something he could provide, then perhaps his work had always been more important than he had ever imagined. 6 months had passed since that extraordinary night when Marcus Chun had walked into a sterile medical chamber and emerged having changed the course of galactic medicine forever. The Astral Medical Complex had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, with medical professionals from across the galaxy coming to study what was now called the Thessarian Protocol, a revolutionary approach to healing that emphasized emotional and relational wellness alongside traditional medical treatment. Marcus had declined numerous offers for interviews, speaking engagements, and academic positions. He remained on the night shift, cleaning the same corridors he had walked for 15 years. But something fundamental had changed, both in how others saw him and in how he saw himself. Dr. Kethvar had been true to his word. Over the past 6 months, Marcus had been quietly called upon 7 times to speak with patients whose conditions weren't responding to conventional treatment. Each case had been different. A young crystalline whose geometric patterns had become chaotic after losing his family. An elderly plasma being who had begun losing coherence after retirement left him feeling purposeless. A middle-aged human diplomat whose anxiety had manifested as a mysterious paralysis that no scanner could explain. In each case, Marcus had simply done what came naturally. He had listened, not as a medical professional seeking to diagnose, but as one conscious being recognizing the pain of another and offering the gift of genuine attention. Not every conversation had resulted in the dramatic recovery that Thessarian Prime had experienced. But each patient had shown some improvement, some movement toward healing that traditional medicine had been unable to achieve. Word of these successes had spread quietly through the medical community, creating a new understanding of the role that human empathy could play in interspecies healing. Tonight, as Marcus made his usual rounds, he carried with him a message that had arrived that afternoon. It was from Thessarian Prime, who had returned to her homeworld but maintained regular contact with the medical facility. Her message was brief but filled with warmth. Dear Marcus, I wanted you to know that yesterday, Velthera visited me not because she needed advice about governing her sector, but simply because she wanted to share the sunset with me. We spent 3 hours talking about poetry, about the colors of different world skies, about her hopes for finding a life partner who will value her for herself rather than her position. It was the most precious conversation I have had with one of my children in centuries. This, too, is healing. Thank you for teaching me to reach for it. Your friend, Thessarian Prime. Marcus smiled as he finished reading the message. Reports had been filtering back over the months about similar changes in the relationships between Thessarian Prime and her other children. Zorathax had begun writing again and had shared his latest poem with his mother. Nethes had brought his new mate to meet her, not for formal approval, but because he was excited to introduce them. One by one, her children were rediscovering the joy of connection beyond duty and obligation. As Marcus rounded the corner toward the medical wards, he encountered Dr. Kethvar emerging from a late meeting. The doctor looked tired, but carried an expression of excitement that Marcus had learned to recognize. Mr. Chun, Dr. Kethvar called out. Perfect timing. I was hoping to speak with you. Good evening, doctor. How can I help you? We have a new situation, and I'm hoping you might be willing to provide your unique perspective. Dr. Kethvar activated his datapad and showed Marcus a file. We have a patient who arrived yesterday. She's a hive queen from the Andromedae Collective, essentially the mother and leader of a species that numbers in the billions. Marcus studied the information on the pad. The patient was named Queen Synthesis, and she appeared to be suffering from what the medical notes described as total systemic shutdown. Like Thessarian Prime before her, every medical test came back normal, but she was clearly dying. What makes this case particularly challenging, Dr. Kethvar continued, is that her species communicates through a form of collective consciousness. Individual conversation, as you conducted with Thessarian Prime, isn't something they're biologically equipped for. She can only communicate by linking minds with others of her species or through technological interfaces. That does sound complicated, Marcus said. What do you think I could offer in a situation like that? Honestly, I'm not sure. But here's what I find interesting. Queen Synthesis specifically requested to speak with the human who healed the mother dragon. She somehow learned about what you did for Thessarian Prime, and she asked for you by name. Marcus felt a familiar flutter of nervousness mixed with curiosity. She asked for me? How is that possible if she can only communicate through hive mind connections? That's what makes this so unusual. She's been using a technological translation matrix to communicate with our staff. It's exhausting for her and not very efficient, but she was insistent that she needed to speak with you specifically. As they talked, Marcus found himself thinking about the patterns he had begun to recognize in these cases. Powerful beings, isolated by their responsibilities and the expectations placed upon them, suffering from conditions that weren't truly medical in nature. Each case had been different in its particulars, but similar in its underlying dynamics. Doctor, will I ask about her background? What's her family situation like? Dr. Kethvar consulted his pad again. That's where it gets interesting. Queen Synthesis is unusual among her species because she has children who have left the hive. Normally, hive queens reproduce offspring who remain part of the collective consciousness permanently. But 8 of her children have developed what their species calls singular consciousness. They've become individuals separate from the hive mind. How does her species typically respond to that? Usually, such offspring are considered lost to the hive permanently. There's no precedent for maintaining relationships with children who have become individuals. Queen Synthesis has been dealing with this situation for the past several years, and our xenopsychologists believe it may be connected to her current condition. Marcus felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. So she's been cut off from 8 of her children, not by choice or conflict, but because there's no established way for her species to maintain family relationships across the boundary between collective and individual consciousness. Exactly. And the timing of her illness coincides with the departure of her youngest child, who achieved singular consciousness 3 months ago. She's grieving, Marcus said with sudden certainty. She's lost her children to a form of growth that her entire culture treats as a complete severing of connection, and she doesn't know how to process that loss. Dr. Ketwar nodded slowly. That's consistent with what we've observed, but it presents a unique challenge. How do you counsel someone through grief when their entire species lacks concept for the kind of individual relationship building that helped Thessarian Prime? Marcus considered this for several minutes. Doctor, would it be possible to speak with some of her children who have achieved singular consciousness? The ones who are no longer part of the hive mind. I believe so. Several of them are in nearby systems, and they've expressed concern about their mother's condition. But understand, they're as confused about how to maintain a relationship with her as she is about how to relate to them. Maybe that's exactly what she needs to hear, Marcus said. Maybe she needs to know that her children are struggling with the same question she is, that the separation doesn't mean they don't care about her. Dr. Kethvar's expression brightened. Mr. Chun, I think you may be onto something. Would you be willing to speak with Queen Synthesis? I should warn you that the communication process is quite different from what you experienced with Thessarian Prime. Different how? She'll need to interface with you through a neural translation matrix. It's not dangerous, but it does create a partial mental connection. You'll be experiencing a diluted version of hive mind communication, which can be disorienting for species that aren't naturally equipped for it. Marcus felt a momentary hesitation, but then thought about the message from Thessarian Prime and the changes that had rippled through her family relationships. If she specifically asked for me, then I think I owe it to her to try. An hour later, Marcus found himself in another specialized medical chamber, this one configured for a being whose biology was radically different from anything he had encountered before. Queen Synthesis was unlike any creature Marcus had imagined. She resembled a living building more than any earthly animal, a complex structure of organic crystalline growths that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. She stood nearly 20 feet tall and was covered with what looked like thousands of small sensory organs that constantly shifted and moved. But, despite her alien appearance, Marcus could somehow sense her emotional state the moment he entered the chamber. The neural translation matrix created a subtle connection between them, and through it, he could feel her overwhelming sadness and confusion. Queen Synthesis, Marcus said aloud, knowing that the translation system would convert his words into the complex pattern-based communication her species used. My name is Marcus Chun. I understand you wanted to speak with me. The response came not as words, but as a flood of emotional information that the translation system converted into concepts Marcus could understand. Queen Synthesis was grateful for his presence, but also uncertain about how to proceed. She had never engaged in individual communication before, and the process felt strange and limiting compared to the rich, multifaceted communion she was used to sharing with her hive. I know this must feel very different from how you normally communicate, Marcus said, but sometimes different approaches can help us see things in new ways. Can you tell me what's been troubling you? Through the neural link, Marcus experienced Queen Synthesis's anguish as she shared her story. For centuries, she had existed as the center of a vast collective consciousness, experiencing life through billions of connected minds while simultaneously nurturing and guiding her offspring. The relationship between Queen and offspring in her species was more intimate than anything humans could easily understand. It involved a complete sharing of thoughts, emotions, and experiences. When her children began achieving singular consciousness and separating from the hive mind, Queen Synthesis had experienced it as a form of death. From her perspective, the children she had known and loved had simply ceased to exist, replaced by strangers who carried their memories but no longer shared their essential being with her. But they're not dead, Marcus said gently, understanding flooding through him. They're just different. They've grown into something new. The concept hit Queen Synthesis with startling force. Through the neural link, Marcus could feel her processing this idea, examining it from every angle with the vast computational power of her consciousness. In human families, Marcus continued, children grow up and become independent adults. They don't share their parents' thoughts anymore. They make their own decisions. They sometimes disagree with us or choose paths we wouldn't choose for them. But that doesn't mean we've lost them. It just means the relationship has to change and grow too. Queen Synthesis pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the translation system interpreted as deep confusion mixed with hope. She had never encountered the concept of relationship evolution. In hive mind society, connections either existed in their full form or not at all. Your children who have achieved singular consciousness, Marcus said, do they still care about you? Do they still think about you and worry about your well-being? Through the neural link, Marcus felt Queen Synthesis reach out with her consciousness, scanning for information about her separated children. The translation system allowed him to share in her discovery as she realized that her offspring were indeed still thinking about her, still concerned for her welfare, still carrying love for her, even though they could no longer share it through the hive mind. They speak of me to others, Queen Synthesis communicated, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to convey wonder. They tell stories about their time within the hive mind. They express what the translation protocols identify as fondness and gratitude. I had not thought to monitor their individual communications because I assumed they would have no relevance to the hive. Maybe that's the first step, Marcus suggested. Maybe learning to value their individual thoughts and feelings as much as you valued their participation in the collective consciousness. The idea resonated through Queen Synthesis's vast mind, creating cascades of new understanding. Marcus could feel her consciousness reaching out in ways it never had before, not to reunite her children with the hive mind, but to observe and appreciate their individual development. There is something else, Queen Synthesis communicated. My separated children have been attempting to send me individual communications, what your species calls messages. But I have not known how to respond to them because they are not structured for hive mind processing. Marcus felt excitement building in his chest. Queen Synthesis, would you like to learn how to communicate with them as individuals? It would be very different from hive mind communion, but it might allow you to build new kinds of relationships with them. The response was immediate and powerful. Queen Synthesis desperately wanted to reconnect with her children, but had no framework for understanding how individual relationships could function. Let me help you with that, Marcus said. Dr. Kethvar told me that some of your children are in nearby systems. What if we brought them here and I helped facilitate a conversation between you and them, not as former hive members try to reconnect to the collective, but as family members learning to know each other as individuals. Over the following days, arrangements were made to bring 3 of Queen Synthesis's separated children to the medical facility. Marcus worked with the translation technicians to develop a communication protocol that would allow the former hive members to interact as individuals while still providing the emotional and conceptual richness that their species required for meaningful exchange. The reunion was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. Queen Synthesis and her children approached each other with a mixture of love, loss, and uncertainty that transcended species boundaries. Through the neural translation matrix, Marcus was able to help them navigate the complex emotions surrounding their changed relationship. I grieve for you as though you had died. Queen Synthesis communicated to her eldest separated child, a being who now called himself Individual 7 of Synthesis. I did not understand that you had simply grown beyond my ability to perceive you. And I believe you had rejected us. Individual 7 of Synthesis responded. I thought our choice to become singular meant we were no longer welcome in your thoughts. Marcus helped them work through the misunderstandings that had grown from their lack of frameworks for individual relationship building. He showed them how love could exist across differences in consciousness, how parents and children could maintain meaningful connections even when they no longer shared the same fundamental ways of experiencing the world. The breakthrough came when Queen Synthesis realized that her separated children had not lost their capacity for love and loyalty. They had simply developed new ways of expressing these feelings. And her children discovered that their mother's inability to relate to them as individuals was not rejection, but simply a lack of understanding about how such relationships could function. You are still my children, Queen Synthesis told them, her bioluminescent patterns conveying a joy that the translation system could barely capture. But now you are also yourselves, and I am learning that this makes you more precious, not less. As Marcus observed the family working to rebuild their connections across the bridge of individual consciousness, he was struck by a profound realization. The challenges faced by Queen Synthesis and her children were not so different from those experienced by any family dealing with growth and change. Whether the issue was a dragon learning to relate to her accomplished adult children or a hive queen adapting to offspring who had developed individual consciousness, the underlying dynamics were remarkably similar. All across the galaxy, families were struggling with the tension between love and independence, between the comfort of established roles and the growth that demanded new ways of relating. The solutions Marcus had been helping to develop weren't specific to any particular species. They were insights into the fundamental nature of relationships themselves. Dr. Kethvar found Marcus several days later as Queen Synthesis was preparing to return home. Her condition had improved dramatically once she began building individual relationships with her separated children, and her renewed sense of purpose was obvious to everyone in the facility. Mr. Chun, the doctor said, I've been thinking about the work you've been doing here. What you've developed isn't just a therapeutic technique, it's a new understanding of how healing can work across species boundaries. I'm not sure I've developed anything, Marcus replied. I've just been talking to people who were hurting and helping them figure out what they needed. But that's exactly my point. You've identified something that transcends species differences, the need for connection, understanding, and validation. Whether we're talking about dragons, humans, hive queens, or any other sapient species, there are fundamental emotional and relational needs that are remarkably similar. Dr. Kethvar paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Marcus, I want to propose something that I hope you'll consider seriously. The Galactic Medical Council has taken notice of the work being done here. They want to establish a new field of study, interspecies emotional healing, and they want you to help lead it. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Doctor, I appreciate the recognition, but as I've said before, I'm not sure that formalizing this work is the right approach. I understand your concerns, and that's exactly why I think you're the right person for this position. The Medical Council isn't asking you to become a traditional academic or medical professional. They want you to help establish training programs that teach other people to do what you do naturally. What do you mean? Imagine if we could train a new kind of healer, people who specialize in recognizing and responding to emotional and relational suffering across species boundaries. Not doctors in the traditional sense, but counselors who understand that healing sometimes requires connection rather than treatment. Marcus considered this idea as he continued his cleaning rounds that night. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. There were undoubtedly beings throughout the galaxy who were suffering from the same kinds of isolation and disconnection that had nearly killed Thessarian Prime and Queen Synthesis. If he could help train others to recognize and respond to such suffering, the impact could be enormous. But he also knew that the effectiveness of his approach depended on its authenticity, on the fact that he genuinely cared about the well-being of the individuals he spoke with rather than seeing them as problems to be solved. The next morning, Marcus requested a meeting with Dr. Kethvar and the facilities administration. When he arrived at the conference room, he was surprised to find not only the local medical staff, but also representatives from the Galactic Medical Council participating via holographic projection. "Thank you all for taking the time to meet with me," Marcus said, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. "Dr. Kethvar has explained the proposal to establish training programs for interspecies emotional healing, and I've been giving it serious consideration." The lead representative from the Medical Council, a crystalline being whose name Marcus couldn't pronounce, leaned forward with interest. "Mr. Chun, the work you have pioneered here has already begun influencing medical practice across multiple sectors. We believe that formalizing and expanding this approach could revolutionize how we understand healing itself." "I appreciate that," Marcus replied, "and I do want to help, but I have some conditions." He took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to propose would be unusual in the highly structured world of galactic medicine. "First, I want to continue working as a janitor here at this facility. The cleaning work keeps me grounded and reminds me that healing happens in many different ways. Second, any training program we develop has to emphasize authenticity over technique. We can't turn empathy into a clinical procedure." The Medical Council representative's crystalline structure pulsed with patterns that indicated consideration. "What would you suggest as an alternative approach? Instead of traditional medical training, I want to help identify individuals from various species who already have natural empathy and communication skills. Then, rather than teaching them techniques, we help them understand how to apply their natural abilities across species boundaries." Marcus paused, gathering his thoughts. "I think the most important qualification for this kind of work isn't medical knowledge or academic credentials. It's the ability to see past someone's power or status or species and recognize their fundamental need for connection and understanding." Dr. Ketwar nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Chun is suggesting that we select for character and natural ability rather than trained expertise. Given the success of his approach, I think this makes perfect sense." The meeting continued for 2 hours as they worked out the details of what would become known as the Therapeutic Communication Initiative. Marcus would help identify and train a new kind of healer, individuals who specialized in emotional and relational healing across species boundaries. The program would be small and selective, focusing on quality rather than quantity. Candidates would be chosen based on their natural empathy, their ability to listen without judgment, and their genuine concern for others' well-being. They would receive training in xenopsychology and interspecies communication, but the emphasis would always be on authentic human connection rather than clinical intervention. As Marcus walked home that morning, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun 6 months earlier when he had asked Dr. Kethvar for permission to speak with a dying dragon. What had started as a simple act of compassion had grown into something that was reshaping galactic understanding of healing and connection. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus had learned something profound about humanity's place in the galaxy. Humans might not be the strongest or smartest or most technologically advanced species, but they possess something uniquely valuable: the ability to recognize and respond to suffering in all its forms, regardless of the species or circumstances involved. That evening, Marcus received another message from Thessarian Prime. This one was longer than usual and included a formal invitation. "Dear Marcus, I'm writing to invite you to attend a gathering I am hosting next month. All 17 of my children will be present, along with their families. It will not be a formal diplomatic event or a crisis response meeting. It will simply be a celebration of family, an opportunity for us to enjoy each other's company for its own sake. I can think of no one I would rather have present to witness the joy that grows from the seeds of healing you helped me plant. Your presence would honor us all." Marcus smiled as he read the invitation. It seemed fitting that his journey into interspecies healing had begun with a dragon who needed to remember how to be a mother, and was continuing with a program that would help others across the galaxy rediscover their own capacity for connection and compassion. The universe, Marcus had learned, was not just a vast collection of different species competing for resources and advantage. It was a community of conscious beings, each struggling with their own fears and hopes and dreams, each needing to know that they were valued for who they were rather than just what they could contribute. And sometimes the most powerful force for healing that vast community was not advanced technology or brilliant medical expertise, but simply the willingness to listen to another being's pain and respond with genuine human caring. As Marcus began another night shift at the astromedical complex, wheeling his cleaning cart down familiar corridors, he carried with him the knowledge that his work, all of it, from mopping floors to facilitating conversations between queens and their children, was part of something larger and more important than he had ever imagined. He was helping to heal not just individual patients, but the fundamental relationships that held the galaxy together. And in doing so, he was proving that humanity's greatest gift to the cosmos was not its technology or its ambition, but its stubborn insistence on seeing the worth and dignity in every conscious being it encountered. The future of galactic civilization, Marcus realized, would not be built on strength or intelligence or technological superiority. It would be built on the simple recognition that every being, regardless of their form or power or status, deserved to be seen, heard, and valued for who they truly were. And that was a future worth cleaning floors for.